I am really excited. Today's guest, he's a legendary guy, Jordan Belfort. You probably also know him as the Wolf of Wall Street. He's got a new book, The Wolf of Investing, My Playbook for Making a Fortune on Wall Street. It's just out. A lot of great stuff in there that really is just kind of takes on a lot of sacred cows. Basically, a lot of the bullshit of Wall Street and the big banks. Says a lot of smart things. We're going to get into it. We're going to first talk a little bit about his illustrious, colorful past. And I have to first thank you. You're responsible for about 60 to 80 hours of real joy in my life. I've probably watched The Wolf 30 times. I mean, it's candy. It's fucking candy. And I know I'm not alone in saying that.
It's great, good movie, especially when you're on an airplane traveling somewhere. You want to blow 3 hours and just have a little fun here. It's just it's a guilty pleasure in some sense, right? I've seen it a bunch of times. I like the first 70% a lot more than the last 30%.
Yeah, I can see it. It's a lot more fun. I as a guy that ate more Quaaludes than just about anybody. I mean, when I was sitting in the theater for the first time, I was at one of their early screenings, and the fucking Quaalude scene when like you could tell the people of a certain age in the audience, because certain people were just sitting there just going okay, and other guys were just fucking falling off the chair because like Quaaludes had never been depicted in the media. It was not a drug that, we knew it growing up in Long Island and Queens and growing up in the 70s and early 80s, but the world did not know it. And you guys kind of really brought the wonderful world of Quaaludes to the screen.
I remember because as a Long Island, I was Queens, which is on the,
I grew up in Bayside also.
Right. So like you used to, on like a Sunday morning on the Clearview Expressway of the LA, you'd see cars cracked up from people who were coming home from the city on lewds thinking they could drive, but couldn't,
Yeah.
So anyway, that was an interesting time. It was a time before, everyone had a smartphone with cameras, so you could get away with a lot more back then. It wasn't video of you stumbling around and, basically making an ass of yourself, but having a lot of fun in the process,
I'll just ask a few things about the movie, then we'll move on. When you learned that Leo was the guy who would kind of option the book, what was the first kind of thing that went through your head?
So it was, it's funny. I had this conversation yesterday with the director for, the Broadway show we're talking about. And interestingly, so it was a bidding war between Leo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Mark Wahlberg.
Like the four coolest alpha movie stars in the world, and
at the time, at the end, it was a long time ago. So Mark Wahlberg wasn't quite as big a star as he is today, right? So it kind of got overshadowed by Leo and Brad, and George was a little bit older. But yeah, and it was amazing. I mean, it was like shocking to me. And then especially when Scorsese got into the picture, I mean, I'm like, wow, like total dream team. So what could you say to that? They just come off the Departed Oscars, and I was like, sold to you guys, Yeah,
you ain't gonna get much better than that. The movie speaks for itself as far as its entertainment value, but it hits a very deep nerve in so many people, particularly young guys. What is it about that movie and your story? And there's a rise and a fall and a rise that hits people in the gut. There's something about that movie that connects beyond just it's a great movie and it's a great story and you're an interesting character. Something else is going on there.
So I think, on some level, it's every guy's, young guy who comes from a poor family or middle class family. It's almost like, it's the dream encapsulated in a movie. And I think it's very easy, like, especially like I said, the first 70%, you see the rise of it all.
It's fantasy,
and like, it's like this just unbelievable, like everyone's dream. Now, obviously, it looks a lot sexier on the screen than in real life. There's a dark side to it, right? Of course, right? Of course, and there's consequences. I went to jail. But that, but it's funny, it's so weird. If you would have asked me when I was 25 years old, if you could make all this money and spend 1 year in jail, would you do it? I say, yeah, probably, by the way.
A lot of guys would.
I'm being honest. You would think that because I remember like, a year in jail. Yeah. But in reality, if you asked me the same question today, I would say no fucking way. I would never do that as an older, wiser person. But when you're young, there's just so much like, you bring insecurities, you bring hopes into your adult life, your adolescence. And, and then suddenly when you're on the cusp of greatness like that, and it wasn't just me. I think the beauty, I'll tell you what it is about the movie. It's not just that I made a lot of money. It was the empowering of all these young kids. And the average kids from, average families that were not destined to be rich, not destined for greatness, so to speak, right? And teaching them a system, and the sales and the camaraderie. That I think is what it is, more than how much money was made by me. It's all the other people that were in the boardroom and how they got rich as well. So that's so enticing for both young men and women. It's not just men, it's women as well, right? And I think that, and again, when you're younger, the consequences are not as clear in your mind. So today I'd love to have done the whole thing again, but with a different type of product.
I guess that's the $1 billion question I have for you, that I've always thought, and we don't know each other well, we've met once or twice, that you have the two skills that are the $1 billion skills. You can sell anything and you know how to motivate and lead people. Okay. Right. With that, those are the two secret sauces. And you could have done it without the cutting the corners, without the shady stuff. So that's what always amazed me. I'm watching you and I'm like, this guy's got it. I mean, people will fucking follow you to the end of the earth. Your essence of selling and understanding, you start with the other guy. I mean, all the stuff. So obviously that's a question you've asked yourself throughout your life.
Yeah, I think some of it was bad luck in the sense that who I met as a mentor. In other words, I just met a person. I was young, a bit naive, and I was so. My ability to sell and also as an entrepreneur outstripped my knowledge of Wall Street at the time. In other words, I was very young. I started a big firm, and then the market crashed. I ended up in a very small firm, and I really wasn't fully aware. And I became aware pretty quickly, but in the beginning, I wasn't aware and got sucked into this sort of on down this road of sort of the low price speculative, wildly speculative stocks, right? And then I tried to battle back from that and do better deals like a Steve Madden shoes and whatnot. But the problem is once you're on that road, it's very it's very difficult to get off that road, especially because everything you do then there's a 5-year statute of limitations. So when I got in trouble, it was like for things I'd done many years before on Wall Street. I was even out of Wall Street when I actually got indicted. But I think that some of it's I just met the wrong people at the wrong time, and also the desire for instant gratification when I was very young was so intense. And like today I realized that the best things in life usually take a little bit of time. Like writing this book, it was 1.5 years in the making, right? Amen. But when it comes out, it takes time. Then so the long-term value, the long-term success, usually you have to delay your gratification a bit. So I went into that $5 the $5 stocks, and I went into it kind of a bit half-cocked, honestly, knowing a lot more about how to sell them than how to create good ones.
And it's no doubt. I remember. You were selling. Forget people know when you store. You sold meat. You sold lobster. But I remember on the beaches, you selling those Italian ices. I mean, I remember the guy in the coolers. There were a few guys. There were a bunch of guys. I mean, on West End 2, Atlantic Beach. I mean, and you guys were mint. I remember talking to this guy. I can't remember his name. It wasn't you. And he told me what he was making on a Sunday. I mean, you worked your ass off, but the guy was pocketing $4,000 on a it was when you're 18 years old, that's a lot of bread.
Especially back in the day, right? So I mean, I started off on Jones Beach in Field 4. I did West End 2. I did Point Lookout. I did Fields. I mean, I did everything. That was the greatest beach, the greatest job ever as a kid to make so much money. And that also, by the way, set the stage for me as an entrepreneur, because I realized at a very young age, if I work my ass off, and I'm willing to do what other people really aren't willing to do, because it was a hard job, right? I was making sometimes $60,000, $70,000 in a summer. It was massive.
Yeah, that's a great. You mentioned Steve Madden. Steve Madden has become one of my closest friends.
Great guy, by the way.
He's a special guy. And I don't think you guys have spoken in a while. What would happen if you guys kind of ran into each other now?
Oh, I give him a hug. I mean, I love Steve, and I think he's a wonderful, a brilliant guy. We had our falling out back in the day, but I think we both looked at it. I know when he's in public, he says nice things about me and vice versa, right? Yes. But we all got caught up in this. In this insane period, right? Yeah. And Steve and I did magic together. We really did with Steve Madden Shoes. That was a startup, right? Steve and I were very close. We worked together. After I left Strat, I went to Steve Madden for a year. And part of it's my fault. I was massively addicted to drugs at the time. Steve had already gotten sober, right? Yeah. So I would be coming into the office bouncing around on Quaaludes, right? But, I think that Steve is a testament, by the way, seriously, to someone that really just building a brand from scratch. And he was a recovering drug addict from his 20s.
He's been sober for 30 years.
For a zillion years, right? But it's a testament. And again, I think it's another thing in the movie, and why I think it was so special with the comeback stories, that people look at that and they say, you know what? I've screwed up. I've made mistakes, but watch, this guy came back from jail, from drug addiction.
He talks. It's interesting. I interviewed him at some retail conference in front of 2,000 young retailers. And when you start talking about prison, people lean in. There's almost I don't want to say a prestige, a cachet to that you did time and you came out, and that has built his, I don't say that's not what his brilliance has built his brand, but that has added to his brand.
It just adds to because I think people respect the fact that, you go to jail, okay, you pay your debt, so to speak, to society, do your time. And the question is, what do you do when you're there, and what do you do when you get out? Like, do you become a career criminal? Like, you use it as gladiator school, or do you use it to learn from the mistakes that you made, get stronger, and go at it again, and this time even better, and don't cut any corners? And that's what Steve did, obviously, on the way out, and myself as well. So, we both took different paths. I went, mine was an accidental one to become a writer. I just, when I went to jail, my bunkmate just by chance was Tommy Chong.
Tommy Chong, I love that. That's genius, right?
And that was the start of me writing, because he's like, oh, you got to write a book. Your life is so insane. And that's how it started. And from there, it went into first, going out and giving speeches afterwards and mentoring people in entrepreneurship. Then ultimately was sales training. And then eventually, what forced me to write this, because this book, I don't like writing. I hate writing, right? But
writing sucks. Yeah, writing sucks.
It's tough, right? Books, I love having written. I just hate writing, right? So I never talked about investing before. I never did. I spoke about sales, on entrepreneurship, and I've trained people all over the world and hired by companies everywhere, but I never talked about investing. And the reason is I didn't want to get involved with picking stocks. And it's a dicey business, right? And then, but I watched my brother-in-law, my wife's brother and sister, and they were getting buried in the stock market like this, like a couple of years ago, in crypto and in stocks. And he asked me to look at his portfolio, and I'm like, this is just insane, right? And that was really, I was like, you know what? All right, here's what you should be doing. And I went and I laid out a very simple, inarguably proven strategy for building long-term wealth in the market, right? Which is really powerful, and which is not even, it's a well-known thing, but it's like the worst and best kept secret. Like, everyone, if you ask anybody, what's the best investment out there for the average individual, they'll tell you what it's in this book, right?
By the way, much detail. The one thing that in the book that I just have I've learned the hard way over 40 years is fucking S&P. If you just put in the fucking S&P, it's like, forget that it's made 10% over 20 years. It's like, if you kind of step back and go, okay, that's the world. And if I believe the world's going to keep going forward, and I've learned, I all these fancy hedge funds and this and every alternative shit. And I finally got to the place now where, like, I'm in the fucking index funds, and then I have some money I play with and some cash. And
exactly. And if the world doesn't go forward, then we have bigger problems.
Everybody's fucked. Yeah, that's it. Everybody's fucked. Right. Yeah, I mean, that's it.
So here's the thing with that. So when I started writing this book, I very quickly, and I always knew that there's a couple of key investments you want to make, right? That are very simple, set and forget investments, right? That have virtually no costs and expenses associated with them, right? And I always knew that, and I'd done it myself. But when I started doing the research and really going back for all the studies and academic stuff, I was like, this is inarguably by far the best way for anyone to really have a giant nest egg waiting for them when they're ready to retire. And the problem is, though, while the information's out there, it's so dry and boring that no one was going to want to read it. So I had to figure out a way to, how do I write this in a way using stories and some humor and my irreverent self, right? And make it laugh out loud funny, but at the same time give some people a turnkey
you know how to sell a fucking book, my friend. You just gave me the bite right there. You know what I mean? I'm going to let you get rich, and I'm going to not rich or be smart investing, but I'm going to do it in a fun way, so it's not like going to school. I mean, you just sold the fucking book. You know
right?
What I mean?
That's the story. So, and interestingly, as I was writing the book, my editor from Simon & Schuster, when I was halfway through or 3/4 of the way, he's like, dude, you know how much money you've saved me? As I'm editing your book, I've changed everything I do. I got rid of my hedge fund manager, I fucking mutual funds, and I went into this sort of, what I really talk about in the book is something called indexing and long-term compounding and dollar cost averaging. Those are 3 pillars of really smart investing. And what those really are, just for the people listening here, it's very simple, right? Is that, human beings by our nature, we're really shitty stock pickers. We just are. We all are. I don't care who you are. You're maybe, and there's a few exceptions like Warren Buffett, all right, but he's not even picking stocks anymore. He's buying companies, right? Yeah. But there are a few great, world-class
Stevie
stock
Cohen.
pickers.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few guys, but right.
But they're not taking your money. Like you can't invest your money with them.
You could early on, but they gave it back. They gave it back, right?
They'll give it back, right? So, and you have the rest of the hedge funds and mutual funds, which are really subpar or average,
and just fucking on a 2 and 20 scheme. It's a compensation scheme. I mean,
exactly. So when they deduct their fees, their compensation,
there's no other business where if you're running $3 billion and the market's up 20% and you're up 8, which means you took a shit. You personally made like $100 million out of the year. It's the only business that you can either win from mediocrity or losing. It's incredible.
Here's the way I look at it, right? So the trap for the average individual, right, is like you say, well, I want to invest my money wisely. I want to have a giant nest egg waiting for me when I retire. So I need to seek out an expert in doing this because an expert's going to help get me the best results. So why would you do that? Well, we've been conditioned to think that way, and rightfully so. For example, if you have a problem in your stomach, your appendix is about to burst, I would strongly advise you to go to a professional, go to a surgeon.
You got legal problems, you go to a really good fucking lawyer. I mean,
right. Don't do your own legal work. Don't do your own surgery. Right. If your pipes burst in your house, don't try to fix your own pipes. Hire a fucking plumber, right?
Right.
So that's works in life to seek out experts. The one exception is fucking Wall Street. If you want to get the best return, don't hire an expert. They do not add extra value. It's not even just that. It's also that when you give someone your money to manage, or they're managing $1 billion or a few $1 billion, they have to show activity. Why? Because how they
what justify are you doing?
You can't say, because they know the best investment is just take it and buy an S&P 500 and just buy it and hold it, right?
Right.
But if they do that, we'll say, well, why am I paying this person fees? So they have to show activity, right? And it becomes, as you said, a fee scheme in the sense that the more assets they collect, the more management fees they get no matter what. And then it's also heads I win, tails you lose. So if they make money one year, they pull 20% of the profits out of it, right? If they lose, you pay all the losses. What kind of game is that? So it's insane. And on the other side, though, I don't want to demonize Wall Street more than I do in the book, but I do it with a caveat. I say, listen, Wall Street serves a necessary, vital purpose in the U.S. economy. It does. Without Wall Street, we'd be screwed. Wall Street creates massive value, takes companies public, finds the best ones, gives them additional capital, secures the credit markets, the debt markets, right? It's instrumental, Wall Street. So that's the useful part of Wall Street where they create massive value. But then you have the not so useful part, or the shit part of Wall Street, the seedy underbelly, where they create bubble after bubble after bubble. They rape and pillage the village with massive fees and performance bonuses, and they also have this sort of you got it. And they also have massive advertising and infotainment where they convince you should be trading for the short term versus doing the smart thing, which is long term buying and hold strategies with the best companies in America. So it's like, so the question is, how does an investor, an average person listening to this podcast right now, whatever age you are, how do you extract the maximum amount of value that Wall Street does in fact create without getting sucked into their corrupt casino, which is the short-term trading game where they usually buying and selling, going from this sector to that sector. Like when you watch Jim Cramer, okay, who's like, if you listen to his stuff, it's like you get financial whiplash from the guy. One day he's telling you to buy this, sell this. If you go the opposite, you probably do better. But the point is that sort of activity is not invested, it's speculating. And there's nothing wrong with speculating. I speculate, right? But if I'm going to speculate, it's not with my main portfolio.
What's amazing, as I'm listening to you, I'm so blown away because it's the ultimate story of you, the ultimate cowboy. Everything this book preaches against
is the opposite
of what you started. And now that you're a wise, evolved gentleman, father, person, you're like, no, guys, no shortcuts. Here's the deal. Here's the bullshit. And no cowboy stuff. We're going to go right down the middle, you know?
If you want to be a cowboy, that's great. But do it money that you can afford to lose, like 5% of your money. Have fun. Maybe you'll make money, but like you probably won't, you know? And this is not like just me saying it. It's historically proven mathematically. There's been study after study. And the thing is that when you go back, in the book, I give you a really funny history of Wall Street. And the reason I do that is because it's not enough for me to just say it. Like if I just say it, do this, everyone's like, all right, well, but if I really show you like how this came to be, you know, and how this, because there's this amazing investment out there right now, right? Which starts with this S&P 500 low cost, ultra low cost index fund, reinvesting your dividends, whether it's through an ETF or mutual fund, either one is fine, paying on some, and I go through that. But the point is how do we arrive here? And why does this make so much sense now? Did it always make sense? The answer is no, it didn't exist when I was starting out. You really didn't have it. It was just getting started.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting.
The ability to go out there and buy all the S&P 500, for those who don't know, is the 500 biggest, baddest, best companies in the United States, right? In all different sectors.
You're buying the U.S. economy.
Exactly. You're buying the U.S. economy, right? Which has been historically a great bet. And also, by the way, it's not just the U.S. economy.
Global, like a third of it, it goes globally.
40% of it is overseas. So you're getting overseas exposure as well, right? So, essentially, and even better still is that the 500 companies that are in the index today are not the same as they were 5 years ago or they were 3 months ago. They change them out when a company starts to fall from grace or becomes less relevant, or they change the weighting based on how the economy, right now, information technology is obviously the biggest thing. Industrials are much less than they were 30 years ago.
Of course.
Right. So it's essentially, as you say, it's mirroring the U.S. economy, and you have exposure to all the best companies. So what happens is if Wall Street goes and finds a great company and takes it public and they become the next Google or Meta, right? Well, guess what? It ends up in the S&P. You're gonna own that. You don't have to worry about that, and you have this incredibly tax efficient way of having exposure to all these great companies, right? And that's the first part. The second part is, and I think what really stops people from taking advantages is they say, "Well, I know it makes sense, Jordan, but I only have $10,000 to invest. How can
I got to turn that 10 into 100 in 4 years." Yeah, I mean, that's what they're looking for.
How is $10,000 going to ever amount to $1 million nest egg when I'm ready to retire? Because it makes 10% a year or 11% a year, right? The answer is it will, through something called long-term compounding. It's a shocking thing.
I mean, that's Buffett. That's Buffett's thing. I mean, that's his whole raison d'etre. That's Warren Buffett right there.
Exactly. And it just seems like unlikely. It's like when you first think, oh, I got to make, as you said, I got to triple my money this year. If I'm going to do anything, I got to find the next Apple or the next token that's going to moon, right? And the fact is you don't. Through this power of long-term compounding, at even 11% a year, when it gets that 20 plus years, it starts to go parabolic. And even a small amount of money. So here's what the case I make in the book. Start with as much as you can, but even a small amount is fine. $10,000, $5,000 is enough, right? And then each month, whatever you can, if it's $50, $100, hopefully more, even whatever it is, add to it every month or every quarter. If you do that and you reinvest your dividends, and the S&P just does what it's been doing for the last 100 years, which is a pretty good bet. And if it doesn't, as you said, we have bigger problems than that, right? We're all fucked anyway, right? You're going to end up, the mathematics say you'll have a few $1 million when you're ready to retire. And by the way, for people in their 20s and 30s, that's pretty freaking young, by the way. Nowadays, people are living longer. And the future's coming, whether you believe it or not. Either you could say, fuck the future, or the future's going to fuck you. So choose which one you want to do. And how do you secure your future is follow the advice. This book it's an argument. It's the right advice. It's not like buy this, sell this. It's just literally, it's, as you said, it's plain vanilla. It's just common sense. And it's so easy to do now with platforms out there. You don't need a broker. You don't need financial advisors. You just don't need that stuff. It's so plain and simple.
I gotta tell you, what's on display here is your gift, because this is true. I've interviewed so many people, and a lot of people have got books, and I really want to read your book. You sold me on the book. I mean, it's just like, book. I haven't read. It's just that, like, as I said, I've been a shitty investor. I've been really good at making money, not good at investing, like a lot of people. I mean, I built a big ad agency. I sold it for an insane amount of money. But since then, if I was a smart investor, I would be worth 3x what I am now.
So here's I'll give you an example. Like, here's like the sort of like style of the rise. So here's the first word. Incredible, I thought. My brother-in-law, Fernando, has got the Midas touch in reverse. Every investment he touches, every stock, every option, every coin, every token, every bloody NFT, every last one of them turns completely to shit. So that's essentially how it starts, right? And so it's like, it's not like I'm teaching you about the market and this fuck where you're gonna. It's like you're laughing, funny, because it's human stories about people who are doing just this, as you said. If you'd be worth 3x if you didn't invest your money like a madman, right? But here's the thing too. You're fortunate because you make a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. And you have the ability to always recover, and you still live a great life. Many people, they can't afford to and my brother was wealthy too, by the way, which was the irony, because a lot of people that are successful, wealthy, educated, bad investors, right? Yeah. So
because they have been taught, go find an expert. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know, instead of figuring out what you need to know, because that's my whole strategy world, is just find the best people and delegate and let them do their thing. And to your point, it doesn't work in this area. Yeah, it's fascinating. Really,
you know why? Also, because, and this is one of the great economic studies out there, which was in the 70s by a guy named Paul Samuelson, a famous economist.
I read Economics 1A at War. I went to Wharton. That's the first book you read.
He did this massive study, and like he just goes, they don't know the mutual futures, but they don't beat the index. They cannot. So there's obviously something going on here, right? So there was always this theory that, that it's so hard to beat the market, but the data stacked up. They went all the way back to like 1880, and like every analyst report, every recommendation, every mutual fund, they don't beat the market, especially when you include the fees. In fact, one of the great chaps is the Warren Buffett, the $1 million bet that Buffett did when Buffett had been yelling this from the hilltops for a while. And finally he made he called out the whole hedge fund industry. I'll bet anyone $1 million that over 10 years, you can't beat the S&P 500 after you deduct your fees. I don't care. One fund, choose as many funds as you want. You can't beat it. And he bet, and someone took the bet and they each put up $500,000, right? I got him Ted Sidis. And after, I think it was on year 7, the other guy threw in the towel.
Right.
It was so far behind, it was mathematically impossible to catch the S&P 500, right? And that guy had it was a fund-to-fund scheme with 100 different funds attached to it. So it's like a layer cake of hedge fund fees. But the fact is, and Buffett was like, simple, just S&P 500, right? Now, that being said, there are a couple of other investments you want to make as well that to balance out, because also, with the S&P, just remember, some years it goes down.
Yeah.
Right.
Some deals it goes down. Look, 1 year went down 40%. I mean, so you can take a real hit, but it comes back.
It comes back. And
so you were about to say the two other things.
Right. So in other words, there's in terms of other products that you want to buy, you want to also have some bonds in your portfolio. Very small amount when you're younger, but more when you're older, to balance, because what that does is smooths out the ups and downs of the S&P, right?
You talk about it in the book when you're in your like 40s and 50s, it should be maybe like 70-30, and then by the time you get to 60, it should be 60-40. Which is basically what everybody's been kind of told. I'm still even though I'm old, I'm still a 70-30 guy, but I should probably be 60-40.
Me too, by the way. I'm more like an 80-20 because I hate bonds. But the thing is that what they don't often say on Wall Street, though, is that 70 that's in stocks, maybe they say it should be in individual stocks that you pick, and that's where the mistakes start.
That's where the trouble gets,
trying to pick individual stocks is really, really difficult. It's like everything is counterintuitive, and also you're playing against people who have faster computers than you.
I've always said to myself, you're the last guy in. I mean, if by the way, you want to put up a guy and say to me against me and go, okay, create an ad in the next 10 minutes, I'll blow everybody away. You put me up against guys who 10,000 or 100,000 guys who are doing this 24/7 with, as you said, the highest technology. You're as the word expression goes, as Gecko said, the last guy in on the deal team.
I'll give you a great metaphor for this. So you go to a casino, right? And try to pick individual stocks. Like you go to a casino, and the odds are against you by maybe 5 or 6%, depending on what game you're playing. And in that 5 or 6% is the massive profits that the casinos make, and they build all this amazing stuff and restaurants and give you free trips because they make that 5 or 6%. That's a legitimate casino, no crime committed.
Sure,
right?
It's a big.
But then you have other casinos that are crooked, where the deck is stacked against you with their loaded dice dealing from the bottom of the deck. Well, guess what? That's Wall Street. So not only is the odds stacked against you because it's so hard to pick individual stocks, but the deck is stacked against you by people who are trading that have better information than you, faster computers. And sometimes, I don't want to mention any names here. It doesn't matter, but you watch Billions. Everyone's trying to get inside information. People try desperately to get some edge, right? They're always looking for an edge.
Even at the highest levels, it's a funky business.
Exactly.
Hey, before I let you go, I've interviewed thousands of people, everybody from Bill Gates to Harrison Ford to Bezos and everybody. You probably gave my single best answer when I interviewed. You're not going to remember this probably, but I was on CNBC at the time, and I was doing like an 8:00 show, and I had you on as a guest. It was the night that Madoff was being processed. Okay, and I said to you, so Jordan, what's he going through right now? And you're not going to remember this, but I've actually repeated this a bunch of times. You said to me, because I'd never heard this word before, I go, the worst thing, the most humiliating thing, you strip down and they got to look up, you got to lift your nutsack.
Lift up your nutsack. I remember that.
I was like, that's my answer. I've interviewed the greatest. I've interviewed the worst.
By the way, the worst part is like, it's so defeating. I'm like, really? It's even as bad as spread them, and spread them comes afterwards. I remember that, by the way. Yeah,
and I remember I was sitting next to a woman anchor.
Michelle, I think it was Michelle.
Michelle Lee, yeah. And I remember she was like, the color dropped, and I said, first time on CNBC, you heard the word nutsack. You heard it here, right here. I
remember that. I fucking remember that. I remember the studio I was in California. I fucking remember that. That's so funny.
All right, the book, and as I said, guys, get this book, because at the very least,
awesome.
you're going to be entertained, but more than that, you're going to learn. I'm actually going to read it, and I don't say this to a lot of people. I am going to read it. I'll actually go out and buy it because we got to get the sales up. I mean, I'm sure it's already a bestseller. The book is The Wolf of Investing, My Playbook for Making a Fortune on Wall Street. As I said, if you're scared of like dry books and how to, this is the opposite. You're going to get all the info, but you can have fun doing it.
Exactly. Thanks,
Jordan Belfort. I appreciate it, man. You stay healthy and well, all right?
My pleasure. Thanks.
Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.